One of the pieces that you need to understand with most of these segments, but especially with schools, is that almost every school is currently with a photographer. And that's okay. Don't let it discourage you. A lot of spouses typically really get upset when you first start in the business and you go out and they ask you questions when you come home and you're like, well, yeah, they're with so and so or they're with so and so. And they don't understand and they get really frustrated. Well, everybody's with somebody already. Well, yeah, because we've taken photographs of students for well over 100 years. In my office, I have a wall of yearbooks, and they started 1845. Now, the first ones with photos in them are the 1895 books, but there are, decades and decades of history and tradition of school photographers. So if you run into a school that doesn't have one, that's kind of a red flag. What happened? Did the photographer fail so horribly that they just walked away and said, we don't want one? And you need to know that going in. Or was the school so hard to work with that the photographer said, I'm done, and they walk away? So I would much rather step in behind a decent competitor than to find a school that doesn't have a photographer at all, unless it was something that was COVID related. Hey, we stopped during COVID, we just never got back. Okay, fair enough. But other than that, everybody ought to be with someone. And at any given point, considering the fact that there's over 130,000 K through 12th grade schools in the U.S., there's probably 25,000 plus that are actively looking to switch photographers at any given point, just from a numbers standpoint. So don't be discouraged if you run into some that are firmly entrenched at this point, because time will soften, they will change their minds, and there are others that you can successfully secure the business on. Do your research, and we help you through that process, finding out, are the schools do they make their own decision at the school level, or are they central office decisions? We talked about looking for elementary schools first. We love the junior high kids and the high school kids, but the buy rate, especially for the amount of time that we have to be in a school, is just a much better situation in an elementary school. And, we're done by 11 o'clock. We come back for a very small makeup. That's a one-person trip, and we're done for that season. Now, we still interact, we engage, we do other things, but as far as the actual photography for an elementary school, up to 400 or 500, that's it. We're done. With a high school, you have media day for the athletes. You may have cross country, you may have cheer, you may have pace setters and band and the football team and all of these groups in the fall. Then you have school pictures. You may have to take photo IDs, photos for IDs at registration. You have winter sports. You have groups and organizations. You have the spring sports. And so there are a lot more demands on your time than there are in an elementary school. Now, with the advent of a good online provider for electronic proofs, now you can make better money at each of those events. So you can do very, very well, but just know that your organization needs to be able to handle more trips to a high school or even a junior high than an elementary. If you want to secure some students out of a high school, perhaps you want to secure that high school down the road, but you can't get in the door right now today, then look for opportunities to photograph their seniors or perhaps the tier 2 sports teams. Now, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. But my son is a cross-country runner. Now, their team has gone to state each year. They're very good, and it's one of the highest performing teams in their school of almost 4,000 students. However, everybody knows in Texas it all surrounds football. It's all about the football. And so, you know, if you had a photographer that did the big events like football and basketball and baseball, those are the things that mentally are tier one sports. Whereas cross country, track, tennis, golf, fishing team, those kinds of things would not rate mentally the same to the vast members of the community as those big sports would. So you have a great opportunity with some awesome kids to take some really creative and engaging photographs that can catch the attention of the big sports teams or others in the school that allow you to get your foot in the door and at least get into a presentation for next year. And here in the Dallas area, our brand did exactly that. Started off with the tennis team, and within a year had several of the very large high schools, as well as most of the middle schools and several elementaries in a very large school district here in the Dallas area. So you can work your way through if you're intentional and deliberate, even if you can't get in the front door that first season. So again, one of the things that really separates the conversation is it a site-based decision or is it a district-based decision? And if you're moving into the volume world and you don't have a large team, then you want to make sure you're focusing on site-based decision districts, at least to start. Because in the blue image here, you see a site-based decision. Everybody makes their own decision about which photographer they use. Now, you may have to get on the list at the central office. Maybe they allow 3 photographers to be on the list. And then the schools can look on there and they can pick any of those 3. Fair enough. Other districts, it's just open. They don't want to mess with it. They don't have a good purchasing office to be able to handle it, and it's just open. But you have an opportunity to book 1 or 2 or 3 elementary schools and not have to deal with anything larger than that until you're ready to handle that. With a district bid, depends on the district, of course. If there's 1,500 kids in the district, that's not as big a challenge. But if there's 15,000 kids, then that's a little bigger deal. And so it really depends where you live, how many kids are in the district, and how they make their decisions. But understand that you can do this. The big boy companies, they hire individuals. And a lot of times, they really don't have the type of training that you can get, even like through our courses. They're given a very short ramp-up training program. Here are our cameras. Here's the schedule. Go get after it. And we see these hiring blitzes in late July and early August sometimes, and they just have to hit the ground running and go. And so there's a real opportunity if you apply yourself and learn the skills that you need, you can compete with these big groups. And I know we went through that in detail in the second module.